the building of Anderson Dock, that had to make a tremendous difference. Then the Goodrich boats coming. What other things represent stages in the evolution, the early evolution of the
Well,
building?
they got a road through Station Bay. That made a considerable difference.
Okay. When was that road built? About?
Well, it wasn't very good until quite late, because when my grandparents first came, they'd take the train to Menominee and come across by boat rather than come to Station Bay and come by road.
It was a fair road, I guess, in the teens. In fact, I got a report from the town of Gibraltar when Ephraim was in. This was a report, I think, was 1916, and then Holand was chairman of the township that time, and he gave this complete report. And the total tax roll for that year, to include Fish Creek and Ephraim, well, the whole Gibraltar area, including Ephraim, was 13,000. Now a lot of people pay that one place. But anyway, they said in there about they had raised, I think, $300 to continue the road up as far as Peter Knudsen. But it was just gravel, you know. I think Tom Carmody was the contractor in that road. He had road building equipment, but all they had was gravel. Till then they got the macadam. That was a sort of I don't know, how would you explain macadam? That was kind of a little similar to blacktop. It got quite hard, but it wasn't as good as blacktop. It would break up easy.
Well, they had for a long time, it was just plain gravel, then they began to oil the gravel to keep the dust down.
Yeah. But I know back when I was a kid, well, the roads were awful dusty. I know you'd see a car. I know that Clarence Smith used to tell the story about Lanky Gibbs. I don't know if you remember him.
I remember times.
Well, he used to live up on the upper road here. And he had a touring car. They're all touring cars at that time. I heard this roaring going by the store, so he run back to the end of the store to see how far he'd gotten, and he was over by the sand beach already. They must have figured he'd going about 75 miles an hour. So those old-time cars could really travel in those big cars.
I guess there were some ferocious potholes in that old road, though, in the early days.
I don't remember. See, in the early days, there weren't potholes because they weren't traveling fast enough. They were dusty, awful dusty. But
how about after a rain, though? What was it like after a big rain?
Well, there were a lot of roads, especially the side roads, where people would get stuck in them. Yeah. You know, go down the mud. And,
sure, they'd just be ruts. They'd be gravel.
And they'd sink into the axle and they'd have to get pulled out. But there were, see, when I was a kid, when the cars were just starting. See, I was born in 1908, and I can remember, well, it was probably 1912, and then that was about the first cars. In fact, Holand had sold his place in the park for $13,000. He bought a brand new 1912 Buick Touring. I suppose he paid about $700-800 for it, which was a lot of money at that time, but he had quite a bit.
Fancy car.
$13,000 was a lot of money. But that was a pretty nice car.